We're back at it again with the fourth episode of Can I Make a Podcast slash channel while working a full-time job, and just trying to put this stuff together for the young folks that are in transition and looking for growth. This is really for the people that are in that transition phase, for coming from high school into force, or perhaps entering into marriage or entering into having children. Any of those transitions, or from college to the workforce, any of those transitions where you'll be faced with paradigm shifts, and you'll be in the confrontation and needing growth. So today's topic is going to be centered around foundation. And the thing I've been thinking about today, as it pertains to the mindset of growth and being prepared for these changes in life, and becoming a master of seeing the patterns that you need to be paying attention to, and then being able to change to better yourself. A lot of that stems from the foundation, or the premise that you start everything off of. So there's a lot of narratives. You hear a lot about narratives now. They push a narrative, you gotta believe a narrative, this or that. But even below the narratives of the media, there's the narratives that you tell yourself. And maybe from a young age, you felt victimized, so you play have a victimized narrative, or have the narrative of a victim, so you see the world through a map or a lens of being a victim. Or you could maybe have a recovery story, so you ended up in a situation that was bad and you recover from that, and that would be a recovery narrative. You've been through something and you made it through, and now you're on the other side of that battle, and your narrative is the recovery narrative. Maybe you don't have a thought out narrative, and you get to create one and not have to reverse engineer something that already exists. So there's many different types of narratives and ways to look at the world, and they all come from underlying structures in development. So a lot of it is important to test your narratives against reality. So if you're coming up on a situation, or you're one that's interested in growth, testing your narratives against what is presenting itself in real life would be a way to grow. Because if you don't have your feet set on a firm foundation, if you're on sand to begin with, you can't really build anything of value. You can't really if everything in your life is chaos, it's not like you're gonna go create $1 million business. Or if the tangibles, if there's no place that you can go and you can just hang out and the world not fall apart, then there's too much chaos surrounding your life for anything to grow from it. So a way to think about, okay, here's a concept. So if you have a narrative, if you have a map, if you have a way of seeing the world, just because you have a map doesn't mean that it's accurate. So I can give you, let's say you're in the middle of Austin, Texas, and then I give you a map of Charlotte, North Carolina. It doesn't matter how good you are at reading a map. It doesn't know how how many skills you have. It doesn't matter how positive an attitude that you keep. If you are reading a map of Charlotte to try to navigate Austin, you're not going to be able to find anything because it's the wrong map. And this is what young people have to face. They are given maps, they're given ways that they can, given ways, or they're given views of the world and given maps essentially. They don't even know how they got them, and they're laid out by media. So you'll look at these celebrities and these influencers and everybody else under the sun, and they will give you a narrative of how the world works. Politics will give you a narrative of how the world works. But ultimately, if you have just such a facet level or surface level understanding of said narrative, it isn't going to be deep enough to actually navigate your life. You're not really going to have, you're not going to have a connected flow of being. And what do I mean by that? If you can go through life and not really have a narrative structure about anything else, and you can just kind of coast and not really do anything. You can just kind of hide under the shadows. But if for a person that's interested in growth, for someone that wants to achieve things, you're going to have an order. If you were to solve a math problem, you wouldn't just, you can't just randomly disperse everything and do stuff out of order. You, in a formula, you have to do your multiplication and your division before you're do your adding and subtracting. You have to do what's in the parentheses before you do what's outside of the parentheses, and you have to simplify your fractions before you can get to an outcome or an answer. Same things to do with organizing your life. If you don't have a measurement or a level or a rule to measure yourself against, or a map or a value set or anything to measure yourself against, there will be no growth because there is no ideal. If there isn't an ideal, then you can move, but there is no telling that it's going to be the right direction. And speed is only useful, like you can be a fast actor, but the speed is only going to be useful if you are going in the right direction. Took the wrong turn, unfortunately. Speed is only useful if you're going in the right direction. There was a story that was laid out to me at some point. It's probably likely in a book that I had read, but there was an entrepreneur, and his goal was strictly monetary. He wanted to make money, and he was actually pretty effective at doing it. And he worked his entire life and built up quite a lot of material success. But he got to the top of the tower and realized that he built his tower, or he leaned his ladder against the wrong building. And once he got off, he finally realized that this is not what he wanted at all. And what I get out of that is spending a little bit of time every day, in reflection, or thinking about what you actually want long term, can prevent you from wasting years and years of your life chasing something that you don't actually find valuable. the more that you focus on the way that you view reality and trying to augment that so that way it mirrors reality as close as possible, the more likely your decisions will have the impact that you'd like. Nikos, the guy that works with me and has been on a lot of these videos, he was telling me that when he was young, he lived in this complex, and on the other side of town was the wealthier folks, and in his area, he was in a poor area of the neighborhood, and the grass didn't grow well on the poor side of the neighborhood, and the grass did grow well on the more wealthy side of the neighborhood. And he told himself, or the narrative was, that the water was bad on the poor side of the neighborhood, and the other side of the neighborhood just had better water, and that's why that the grass didn't grow well on their side of the neighborhood versus the other side of the wealthier side of the neighborhood. Well, lo and behold, he had a friend that lived on the wealthy side of the neighborhood, and he started hanging out with his friend. I believe his name was Tyler. And he saw that his dad seeded the ground. He took up weeds. He planted grass seed. I already said seeded the ground, but he pulled weeds and he cared for the lawn. He cut it in a specific way so that way it would look a certain way based off of the sunlight. And he put a lot of time and care into the way that his yard looked. And it broke his paradigm of, well, I just assumed, or he had assumed, that it was some thing that was just putting them down that was the reason that their grass couldn't grow, but it was really just they didn't put the money and the effort into making the grass grow like the folks on the other side of town had done. Obviously for economic reasons, but it wasn't just because the water was bad. It was because these people actually put effort into having this specific monotonous thing work. And a lot of things are like that. There's a lot of victimhood mentality that simply could be solved. It can't simply be solved because people don't want to change. Typically, change is only going to happen when it's absolutely necessary and there's no other option besides it. But taking yourself out of the situation. So in that place, he assumed something about another thing, but he was able to go look behind the curtain on that side instead of automatically assuming something that you see. Because, especially online, getting a little bit deeper and unveiling the curtain might show that what you initially thought was not the case at all. In my trade, I tell everybody that I train, the number one rule is not to assume, because as soon as we start assuming stuff, we're going to end up in trouble. So we have to validate and make sure that we are doing exactly what we were supposed to be doing at any time. And if there's questions, we need to ask them and have someone that has the authority to make that decision. Another thing to ponder on when setting out a plan or what you would want to happen in your life. A lot of people have to struggle with this because the thing is if you sit down and proactively plan out, let's say the next 10 years, and you write it all down. What would happen if I won the next 10 years? And you really held yourself to that and stuck to it. The thing is it would elucidate the goal. And once the goal is elucidated, you have a way to fail. You also have a way to win, but you have a way to fail. And a lot of people go through their life and they don't have any large mission or goal or anything that they are truly pursuing. And if there is something that they want, they can just reverse engineer it down to being some kind of systemic factor that is outside of their control and allows them to pass blame and claim morality because of their oppressed status. It's like Nietzsche said that most morality is just cowardice disguised. That's paraphrasing, but most morality is just cowardice in disguise. Like, you can say you would never cheat. You can say that you wouldn't sleep around with everybody. You can say that you wouldn't take a deal that gave you a lot of money that had some sketchy connotation around it. You can say that you would not do X, Y, and Z because you are morally better than that. But ultimately, values are meaningless until they're tested. And most people, for sure, hide behind morality to make them not responsible for changing their situation. It's so much easier to do that. On a day-to-day sense, it's like you're gonna suffer no matter what you choose. If you decide to set out your path and have a goal and have a way to win and a way to fail, it's like it's gonna take pain. You're gonna have to learn whatever you have to learn to make those things, to achieve those goals. But regardless if you do that or not, you might not have to force yourself to learn something. You might not have to force yourself to go to the gym. You might not have to force yourself to wake up early in the morning. But pain will come and suffering will come regardless. So you can laissez-fairely walk through life and not really have a goal or orientation, but suffering is going to come regardless. So why not choose a life where the suffering is worth the reward that you get? Like, why not choose something yourself that you would actually be thrilled if it panned out? And regardless or not, life is going to be full of problematic things, but if you choose yourself what you think would be the absolute best case for your life to pan out, and you pursue that, and to a certain extent you achieve that, then the suffering would be worthwhile. It would be for a purpose. While some will spend their whole life thinking that they could do more and wishing that they did or wishing that they would, but they never take any action, and then all their suffering when they're on their deathbed, they're just see their life as wasted opportunity. Almost all the things that are hard Sorry, we lost connection there for a minute. I can't tell if the sound is working anymore or not, unfortunately. Well, hopefully it is back working again. As I was saying, we were talking about how regardless of what you choose in life, you're going to have a lot of difficulty and pain and suffering. You might as well choose something yourself that is you would deem worthwhile if you went through it and achieved it to amass for the suffering. And you got great thinkers that essentially suggest that any amount of suffering before one is born eclipses any amount of good that they could possibly have. But I think that's just a very reductive approach to potential. I think everyone has potential to achieve what they would want to set out to achieve in their life. I think it's just hard to make the short-term decisions to keep on pursuing it. But ultimately, you're going to live your life and you're going to spend all that time doing something. It should be worth the pain that you endure. It should be worth the hard times. Almost anything that is very worthwhile comes with hardship. Having children. There is nothing like having children. You love them like, if you're a good parent, you love your children to the moon and back. But having such a connection also renders the ability for you to be hurt, either by them or if something would happen to them. Being married, it opens yourself up to be hurt, but it's also a transformative process. Like in Genesis, the word in the King James is help me, but the word in the Hebrew version, I can't remember the word, but the definition is something like beneficial adversary. So, like, as iron sharpens iron, a Christian sharpens the countenance of his friend, or two believers sharpen the countenance of their friend. That's a paraphrase for sure. But the point is when you enter into a marriage, it's not just for the happiness of the couple, it's for the long-term development of both of you and to ensure the proper place for children to be reared up in proper accordance with what is good and right. So all these starting a business, running a business, doing anything like that takes a lot of upfront pain and work. It takes a lot of work, but ultimately, once it's successful, it becomes a sense of pride and of a serotonin release as you eclipse your goals. So that's the thought process of growth today. Just to resurface, checking your maps, making sure that you're seeing the world as accurately as possible. If everyone around you says that you're crazy, chances are you're crazy and everyone else is right. Most likely. Now, I will say that in order to be exceptional, you have to be the exception, because being exceptional is not the norm. But if you are in pursuit of something that is special, you would know. You would already know. If you don't have a specific aim and you're not trying to achieve something, then if someone's calling you crazy, then they're probably talking about behavior patterns they're seeing expressed. So if you're actually wanting to grow, if you're actually wanting to change to meet the next challenge of your life, then making sure your maps are as accurate as possible is going to be imperative to making good decisions. If you got a data sheet and you were supposed to pick stocks based off of data that was incorrect, you're not going to pick the right stocks because the data is wrong. So you have to have good data and good information and things that you can trust to map the world off of. I think a good definition of wisdom is the knowledge of things that always repeat. I think regardless of your religious stance, religious documents, philosophy, and like the Bible and certain Buddhist texts are full of wisdom. They're full of the knowledge of events that always happen and will always happen. Repetitive cycles, the laws of human nature. So the more that you can know and map that, the more accurate your decision making will be. And then secondly, set a goal. I'm a fan of conditional shoulds. So if you want to have a very simplistic life and you're perfectly fine with basically, going along to get along, and you don't have a specific problem you want to solve, then, maybe your conditional should is just do what you're doing. If you're happy doing that, then I guess you've won. But if you want to grow and you want to become everything your potential could accomplish, if you want to manifest that, then you're going to have something to measure yourself up against, and you're going to have a goal to cross. And setting those goals, they will give you negative feedback if you aren't reaching them, and they'll give you positive serotonin if you are reaching them. And that's a mood stabilizer. If you're going through life and you're somewhat depressed, from day to day, now clinical depression, I'll let a psychologist or psychoanalyst deal with that. But if you just feel lost and you don't have direction and you're not having sustained happiness, there are two systems for hormone excretion in your brain that regulates a lot of your happiness emotion. So the dopaminergic system is split into two parts. One part controls a lot of very basic desires, like temperature regulation, excretion, and 4 or 5 others. But the other side is the side that is for exploration. And when you get a dopamine hit, that's a short-term hit, and it will reward you for whatever that specific thing was. So certain things will give you dopamine hits. If you're scrolling through TikTok, or if you're playing a video game, or certain things, they will give you short-term dopamine hits. But the problem with those is as soon as the frame dies, the dopamine goes away. So say you're playing a video game, you do really good and you're entertained for that amount of time, but as soon as that goes away, the dopamine is done, and that's it. Oh my God, those people don't know how to drink. And
They probably do, but that was crazy. So it's short term. Let's say you feel the desire that you're hungry and you go eat. You're going to feel happy and satiated while you're eating. It will release dopamine, but as soon as that's over, it will go away. And then you're going to have to chase another dopamine hit. And it could develop a dopamine addiction unless serotonin is also presented, and that is released whenever you are making progress towards a goal, not achieving a goal, making progress towards a goal. And that is a mood stabilizing hormone, and basically it will just give you that natural good feeling, like a natural state of happiness. As you're more extroverted, you're probably already naturally more happy because you have a tilt towards the positive emotion spectrum versus being more nihilistic, or not nihilistic. Openness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, versus if you're higher in if you're more extroverted, then you're likely less neurotic, because those are opposite in their clumping. So, man, missing that word literally just shifted my entire train of thought. But setting out that path and having the serotonin release as you work towards a goal is a mood stabilizer. It gives you a direction. It gives you something to aim for and achieve. And the higher and better the goal is, and the more situated it is, the longer term that process is. That's why religion does a really good job, because the key foundants of religion is becoming more like God, and God is perfect. So then it's something that you're never gonna live through manifestation, because you can't become God because you're human. It's an aim that is constant, and you're always in progress of getting better to that. It's like you're always in progress of making yourself as close to the perfect being as possible. And you can do that with any aim, but the higher the aim and the more pure the aim, the more drive it will have, and the more opportunity for a serotonin release. So that is the wrap up for today's shorter vlog. We were not as far away today in our commute, but hopefully something amongst this will be beneficial for the people that are interested in growth. This is Dylan James Growth on X and on YouTube, and we will be coming out with other platforms soon. I'm gonna do an Instagram and a Facebook and a TikTok. Yes, even a TikTok. Thank you. Stay growing.